and new books for spring, summer 2015. This is Philosophy and Politics. More discards from my library. This first book, which the cover is not that interesting, but it's part of the Credo series. And this particular volume in the Credo series is by Conant, who I believe was the president of Harvard University for a time, James Bryant Connet, and his volume in this series is called Two Modes of Thought: My Encounters with Science and Education. The Credo series. So at the beginning of this book, I'm not sure who she is. I don't know if she's not part of the board of editors, but she is someone who wrote the introduction to this book. But it's the introduction of what the Credo series is, which of this book is a volume of. And it's quite strange. I was reading this what the Credo series is supposed to be, and it's very Hegelian or existentialism. That's what I'm kind of getting from it. So I'm going to read some of it here just to kind of give you a taste of it. So it says, "The absolute has surrendered to the relative. Our era of relativity, however, whether in science or in morals, does not allow us to assume that relativity implies an absence of ground to stand on, and therefore a relaxation of all effort toward foundations. There is no firm ground, the dominant malaise of our time. This acceptance of non-finality summons us to a heightened task, for the failure of formulated absolutes leaves the absolute requirement to evaluate again that uncaptured reality which contains and guides the total meaning of our existence." And then on the next page, "For the whole meaning of self lies within the observer, and its shadow is cast naturally on the object observed." That's a very subjectivist point of view. Or this one here, "We become aware that to believe is to see." Again, that's a very subjectivist, very Kantian point of view. And here's some existentialism. This is in the same Credo series introduction. "For the personal is a far higher category than the abstract universal. Personality itself is an emotional, not an intellectual experience, and the greatest achievement of knowledge is to combine the personal within a larger unity, just as in the higher stages of development, the parts that make up the whole acquire greater and greater independence and individuality within the context of the whole." That part sounds very existentialist to me. But then I see all kinds of stuff about unity, which is Hegelian. But anyways, that's just what the Credo series is supposed to be about. But once you get into the Connet stuff, it becomes, his chapter is more autobiographical. And I read the first few pages of it. It's talking about he had various positions in life for his career. He studied science at Harvard. He became Harvard president. Then he worked as a commissar between Germany and America. And then he started studying public education. And so he's talking about how he did that. And he also talks about giving a lecture in Germany about how people think. And there's these two ways of thinking. And I guess this is kind of the basis of what he's going to be discussing in the chapter. So anyways, I thought that might be interesting. And the Conant I definitely know from stuff on education, so that's why I picked it up. Here's another one in philosophy. This is on the philosophical foundations of physics. This is by Rudolf Carnap. You may know Carnap. He's a bit of a name in philosophy. But this is, I wanted to have a look at what is discussed in terms of philosophy of physics, because I thought that it's got to be based in metaphysics, and it seems to me the prevailing views of quantum mechanics, which I don't think this will discuss, because maybe it discusses somewhat, but this is 1966, so I kind of doubt it talks about quantum mechanics. But there's this problem with in metaphysics is that you can discuss things in terms of cause and effect as the underlying nature or mechanism of the universe. But then how do you discuss something like quantum mechanics where actually the mechanism of the universe is chance? That seems to be a problem, a metaphysical problem, not a physics problem, a metaphysical problem that philosophers would have to discuss, not physicists. And actually in this book it does discuss relativity theory of Einstein, and it actually has in here Kant's synthetic a priori. So there should be some good stuff in here, and I wanted to have a text in philosophy of physics, so I think that's necessary. Here's Quine. You may have heard of Quine. W-V-O, Quine, word and object. So he was a philosopher of language, and he was kind of around when the analytical movement was and the positivism and stuff was going. But I'm curious to see what I don't have anything on Quine, so I'm happy to read what his positions are. But he's definitely a language guy, so we'll see where that comes from. Here's just a couple classics that I picked up to have another copy of. Here's Hume's A Treatise of Human Nature and Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. So those are pretty standard. Here's Foucault, which I don't have anything on. Actually, do I have anything on it? Maybe I don't think so. I think this is the only thing I have. Foucault is the Archaeology of Knowledge, and it says here the premise of this book is he suggests how rhetoric can be studied and understood in its relationship with power and knowledge. This is going to be a strange kind of epistemology because usually power is not discussed in epistemology. But I suppose the only way you can really go with this to kind of discussion is suggest that certain kinds of knowledge or propaganda, in a sense, rules, just like how they say the winners of wars write history. So he may be discussing that, but I don't think that gets into epistemology. I don't think you can get into epistemology unless you discuss subjectivities. And then you suggest that would have to be Foucault's first premise, and then you'd have to suggest that certain subjectivities rule over others or dominate over others. That's the only way you could go with this premise of power and knowledge. So we'll see if that's where he goes, but I assume that's what he'd have to do. He'd have to argue that way. Okay, a few in politics. This could have been in the history section, but I put it in politics. This is Thomas Jefferson by Christopher Hitchens. And I'm a big fan of Christopher Hitchens, so when I saw this, even though it's a little bit water damaged on the spine, but when I saw this, I had to have it. And it's got that strange cutting on the paper. The paper's kind of rough on the edge here. But anyways, it's this nice little book, I guess, on Thomas Jefferson that Hitchens was commissioned to write, although I didn't really know whether Hitchens had anything to say about Jefferson, but I guess he does. So that'll be nice to another Hitchens book to go through. Here's a big book with many authors called Dumbing Down, Essays on the Strip Mining of American Culture. And I was looking through this, and there really isn't a lot of authors there's a lot of authors, but there's no one here that I picked out as anyone I know of, anyone that I think is famous or respectable. So I don't know if this is going to be any good, but I know the reason I did get it is because it's got a section here on education, about 150 pages or so on education. So I probably will just read that as opposed to the rest of it. It's got arts and sciences, media, public life, and private life. But I probably am just going to read stuff on education. So that should be nice. Hopefully there's some good stuff in there. Here's an interesting one. The Last Intellectuals, American Culture in the Age of Academe, by Russell Jacoby. This is published in 1982. And this is a perfect book. The reason why I picked this up is because it discusses exactly what I think is a problem today. And I think I've probably said this in other videos before, but one of the reviewers on the back of the book here says that this book analyzes the decline of the public intellectual and his replacement by academic specialists. That is definitely happening. The narrowing and narrowing of academics, I guess, or intellectuals. And you could say this, well, why is this happening? One idea is it's a consequence that the only way to make any progress today is to be a narrow specialist. However, I don't think that we will ever lose or not need anymore the person who synthesizes all this information. Yes, we need researchers. I don't call them professors or academics. I call them researchers. Yes, we need researchers who are very narrow in what they do. Just like medical lab workers who pipette solutions and put them in those little holes to study cell growth or whatever. We need people that do very narrow stuff like that. But somebody has to take that knowledge, those research papers that are written. Someone has to read those things and make decisions with it. And researchers that are very narrow and academic specialists, as this person, as this reviewer calls them, they can't do that. They don't have the knowledge to the more well-rounded knowledge to be able to make any decisions with that information. They are narrow researchers. So in a sense that as specialists narrow, the less important they are in terms of making decisions for a country or for policy. The more and more they are simply capturing or researching a very narrow topic and reporting on their findings. But we still need people, and I dare say that they should not be politicians, for God's sakes. We still need intellectuals, people who are generally educated, that are able to make decisions based on a wide variety of considerations, which include the research that is done. So this, I hope, is a fantastic book that discusses this trend. And like I said, to ask why this is happening, the reason may be that because we're so far advanced, the only way to make progress is to be so narrow. But I'm hoping that that isn't the case. It may actually be an institutional phenomenon, that the only way to get published and to be renowned as an academic, or as I call them, a researcher today, you have to be very specialized and narrow in what you do. And the last one is, I guess it's a kind of autobiography. This is William F. Buckley Jr. Let us talk of many things, collected speeches. I'm hoping to gain something from William Buckley Jr. He is definitely a conservative, and he's definitely, you may have seen him on what's called the firing line, something like that. He had a famous debate with Chomsky, and he's had all kinds of other famous people on his show, and so I guess I'm hoping to find some wisdom in here from him. Why was he so important? He also famously had not so great things to say about Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged. I think he called it transcendently awful or something like that. I don't know if he actually read it though, but so I'm hoping to find something good here. There's a reason why certain people are names, even having their own shows. So, well, traditionally that's true, not so much today. But I'm hoping that there's something in here that's worthwhile. And I think I still have his book, the Governor Listeneth or something like that, which I haven't touched, but when I do touch it, actually Milton Friedman has a review on the back here, a remarkable and moving record of a passionate life devoted to the cause of freedom. Well, in some ways, I suppose, but I don't see conservatives as being always for freedom. They tend to be for social controls. Liberals tend to be for social freedom, but they tend to be for economic controls. There's got to be a better way than this dichotomy, liberal versus conservative, because they advocate for some freedoms, and then they advocate for some controls. They both have their own ways of doing that, and there's got to be a better way than that. So, okay, and the last new books will be education and a few classics.